The program you are about to hear is The 10 Qualities of Mind. This is part of a series of discussions with Richard Kinninger entitled On Becoming an Initiate.
Your brain is a fantastically complex living computer, able to perform many complex feats in a split second, which no man-made computer has been able to duplicate. Nevertheless, you are not your brain. Rather, your brain, as well as your entire body, is a tool through which you as ego operate in order to gain the experiences by which you eventually learn all there is to know of the physical plane. Man is mind, and mind is a radiant power of the fourth plane of existence. Your mind, and not your brain, holds the potential to enable you to eventually become one with God. When the Bible speaks of man as having been created in the image of God, it is referring to this marvelous power of mind. Its potential is activated as you work through the various experiences which arise in your many incarnations. There are 10 qualities of mind. They are memory, desire, will, curiosity, consciousness, conscience, creativeness, intuition, reason, and emotion. When I speak of these 10 qualities, it is in the context of their functioning on the discarnate egoic level, where they are uninfluenced by the conditioned reflexes of your brain or the drives imposed by your physical body. The psychological aspects which are inherent in brain functioning have also been excluded from the definitions for each of the 10 qualities. I would now like to present a thumbnail definition for each of the 10 qualities of mind, and after each definition and explanation, have a brief period for questions and answers. Please feel free to bring up any concern as we move along. We will begin with memory. Memory is the ability to recall or reproduce what has been learned and retained through one's experience and intellectual activity. Memory is also the store of things learned and recognized. Memory has the power to reproduce images, sounds, and impressions of what is no longer before one, and it allows one to identify something previously known. All the knowledge accumulated by an ego is his soul. Soul is the essence and spirit of an ego's character, the extent of his advancement, and the sum of his accomplishments gained through all his incarnations. The soul is the overself which knows far more than what the ego has impressed on any of the individual brains through which he has functioned during his incarnations. Soul knowledge comes through to manifest in the physical incarnation as character, disposition, and life purpose. Okay, are there questions?
Why do we lose our memory of past incarnations in astral life when we incarnate?
I hear two possible aspects in your question. Are you interested in the brain mechanics or the purpose of this blocking?
Well, how about both?
I really can't expound on the nature of the mind-brain interface. There have been many hypotheses which try to point to some specific anatomical area or gland as being the site of the mind's control over the brain, but I'm pretty much persuaded that the whole brain is susceptible to mind power. The brain seems to be a mass of surging electrical activity, which is just on the verge of activating the body which it controls. One's egoic mental command is all that is needed to tip the delicate equilibrium of this electrical activity, which is always at the ready, in order to set the body into motion. The mechanism that keeps other egos from so commanding your body in the same way is even more intriguing and mysterious to me than the mind's power over the brain. Perhaps this has to do with signature matching. That is, the unique vibrations of your ego have been so thoroughly imprinted on your brain as you've developed it from childhood to adulthood that the brain is selectively tuned to your mind's signals. However, by means of hypnotism, you can allow transfer of that unique control to another's mind power. The reason for your inability to recall your former lives and your experiences on the astral plane during discarnate periods and while you are asleep is that this block has been designed by our angelic creators to keep us to our intended tasks in a lifetime. I suspect that were we to be readily aware from childhood of the beauties and possible pleasantness of astral existence, the tendency to kill one's own physical body in order to derive surcease from the trials and hardships of physical life would be much too tempting. In addition, were we to know our life plan and the karmically caused hardships set before us, we might try to fake our way through life and avoid its real teaching situations rather than learn the lessons we designed for ourselves.
Is egoic memory a function of the Akashic record?
No, the Akashic record is a function of the second plane of existence and is therefore on the etheric plane. Egoic memory is a power of the fourth or mental plane of existence, since memory is a function of mind.
In what form are egoic memories stored? Is there something that is part of one's mental body that is analogous to a brain?
No, mind has the attribute of pure spirit. We as egos can travel around the world in a twinkling without the impedimenta of an astral shell or a mental body. Yet, certainly, your ego exists and is an imperishable bundle of mental powers and qualities. The bodies an ego can occupy on higher planes are made up of atoms of the appropriate nutational rate, but mind is an energy, not a higher analog of matter. The physics of the upper planes can be totally different from that of the physical world, and what forms of memory storage are available on higher planes is likely far removed from any corresponding structures on the physical plane. Indeed, mind as an energy should have no molecularly structured instrument to contain or energize it. Again, I can better reason what the mechanics of mind can't be, rather than what it really happens to be.
When we return to the astral plane between incarnations, do we have recall of our egoic memories?
Yes, but only after you have elevated your attitudes and vibrational level to the upper levels of the astral awareness. You have to bring your vibratory nature down to the physical realms in order to mesh with a physical body, and thus make attunement with your physical body possible. Just because a person goes through transition does not automatically give him access to his egoic memory. A continued expression of interest in physical affairs after death would keep you earthbound until you uplift your attitudes to those appropriate to full astral expression. Only then will you be projected into awareness of the activities of fully functioning astral experiences. A person who operates on the usual astral levels during sleep will tend to view the etheric analog of physical existence and be unaware of his prior lives and experiences. But should he seek higher teachers, he will project into the upper astral and have available to him personal recall of his egoic memory through higher egoic self-awareness. Okay, let's go on to the thumbnail definition of desire. Desire is a conscious intention to acquire a goal or to achieve an experience that promises enjoyment or satisfaction in its attainment, and desire can range from a mild wish to a burning passion. To desire does not imply the carrying through required to fulfill or attain its object. Egoic desire can manifest as an emotional longing, frequently based on an attraction to the opposite sex. The dreams and fantasies of egos who are discarnate reflect their desires, which instantaneously become their environment on the astral plane. The nature and content of a discarnate ego's thoughts are that ego's reality for whatever duration he thinks those thoughts. Are there questions?
Does desire have anything to do with the power of precipitation? In other words, do I exhibit a greater amount of mental energy or power if I really desire something?
Definitely. Desire is what steps up the power of your signals to the universe to bring about a mental precipitation. Emotions frequently provide further energy, and they usually increase incentive to strengthen your desire.
You said that our desires precipitate instantly while we are on the astral. Why doesn't it occur that way on the physical plane?
Well, it's fortunate that we in incarnation experience slowness in this area. Thereby we are protected from our fears being instantly precipitated into reality and from our negative feelings towards others taking overt form immediately. This slowness in the outworking of human desire has probably saved the race from its self-destruction. We usually experience success in precipitating something only after a determined, single-pointed intention, which is long reinforced by repeated visualizations and one's considered evaluation that the end result is truly what one wants. But of course, the precipitation of things harmful to ourselves and others is also possible, and the net result of success of these negative desires usually bears painful karmic repercussions. Our creators, in their wisdom, have thus assured us the option of frequently thinking things over during the more protracted precipitation process while we are incarnate.
As part of our desire, is there something built into us which urges us to pursue excellence and egoic growth, or is that something which we eventually learn to want?
The urge to pursue excellence and egoic growth is built into your ego by God. Curiosity, dissatisfaction with the status quo, and the aspiration to wholeness and real love are all part of God's intention to have man strive for reunion with his Creator. All the avenues by which it is possible for man to attain oneness with God were designed by God. All man's choices are limited to the options designed by God. An ego does not have an infinite variety of expression and choice. He is programmed and directed by God in ways which have been set up to eventually, and without individual exception, follow the course which leads us to celestial power and bliss. And all he can do is delay his progress by exercise of free will and explore painful side excursions.
You said desire does not imply the attainment of what is desired. Then what does bring about the actual realization of a desire?
The answer to that is the next quality of mind, will. The thumbnail definition of which is as follows. Will is the determination to marshal the necessary efforts to achieve a goal. Will involves the resolution of choices into an intention and employs persistent striving and self-command to accomplish the ego's purposes and desires. Question?
It seems like will is a focalizer of our mental energies. At first we desire something, and then we focus our minds on attaining what we want. Is that correct?
Yes.
In your previous discussions, you referred to the threshold of will. Is that associated with the brain, or were you referring to the will as a quality of mind?
Will is definitely a quality of egoic mind. The brain has to be disciplined by the will in order to keep it focused on the desire, in spite of the resistance of the body to work.
When we speak of God's will, are we talking about a quality of mind?
God has formed and controlled the entire universe solely through his mind. We too have the same mental potential as our Creator. There's no difference between God's mind and your mind, except his is fully developed, and yours is in its primitive stages of stretching forth towards perfection. Okay, let us next consider curiosity. Curiosity is the impulse to know and to probe the unknown. Human ego seeks self-understanding, which leads to inquiry into one's own workings. God has built into ego an inherent tendency to become dissatisfied with the status quo, and this makes the ego reach out for what is new and exciting and interesting. Curiosity is a driving force which impels one to search, learn, and advance, even in the face of danger and discomfort. Okay.
Children seem to have a natural desire to explore and learn about things. I assume this is a demonstration of egoic curiosity. What I'm wondering is, since a child is frequently liable to break something or endanger himself, should his curiosity be restricted? Will this have a negative effect on him?
The tendency of small children to investigate things does not necessarily spring from egoic curiosity. Kittens and puppies explore everything in their immediate surroundings in much the same way as a human infant, but animals have no ego or mental characteristic of curiosity. I think it is important to protect property and the child from harm. There are limits to everything, and if the parents can cleverly distract the child from dangerous activities and firmly set limits without frightening or berating the child's behavior through the years should not become neurotic.
How about sexual exploration of his or other children's bodies?
That childhood activity has been going on since time immemorial, and it is better for it to happen earlier, when it is more neutral, than later. It is important for the parents to remain neutral towards small children's innocent explorations of one another and a child's discovery of the pleasure areas of his own body, lest they induce guilt and childish fixations in their offspring. All right, let's move on to consciousness. Consciousness is the ability to distinguish one's inward state and provides an awareness of one's existence as a distinct entity, separate from external things and beings. Consciousness provides a perception of one's own growth and future projections. The ability to concentrate one's exclusive attention on specific and ordered thought processes is a function of consciousness. Being attentive, observant, and aware is a part of one's conscious ordering of knowledge. An ego's perceptiveness of others' meaning and intent is another aspect of consciousness. Clairsentience, clairaudience, and clairvoyance are non-physical manifestations of consciousness. I don't see any hands. Yes?
As egos, how are we conscious of our experiences? As an ordered sequence or as a holistic gestalt, the big picture?
Well, both.
Using psychoactive drugs is said to alter one's consciousness. I assume that this is a brain malfunction. However, does it affect or alter one's egoic consciousness?
LSD and mescaline molecules are almost identical to serotonin, which is naturally produced by nerve cells. The ingestion of these hallucinogens tricks the brainstem so that it reacts as though there is enough serotonin in the bloodstream to keep the dream centers of the brain from invading the incoming sensory pathways of the brain. When asleep, serotonin production drops and the whole brain is flooded by dreams, which can then use the pathways which are normally used exclusively by the perceptual centers during one's awake time. People who, for some reason, do not produce sufficient serotonin suffer an overlay of dreams upon their awake perceptions, and thus they cannot distinguish between dream-generated input and reality input. They respond inappropriately to the real circumstances around them because they are trying to deal with the overlay of their dreams as if they were also reality. This is the source of the hallucinations of schizophrenia. Hallucinogenic drugs produce the same kind of mixture of dreams and awake perceptions of reality, a kind of short-circuiting of the brain pathways. The effect that schizophrenia and hallucinogens have on egoic consciousness is probably negligible after one lifetime, considering the balancing effect of many normal lifetimes to offset a bad one. Nevertheless, such confused experiences warp one's brain awareness to the point of making a given incarnation anywhere from valueless to destructive. If one's attitudes and view of life are formed through a brain deranged at some time by drugs or insanity, there is likely to be a carryover into decarnate existence until one can put his perceptions of the universe back into proper perspective after transition.
When we are incarnate, is our consciousness the same as our brain awareness?
Not identically, but for all practical purposes our consciousness must function through our brain awareness, except during expanded moments of true clairvoyance. When your body is asleep, your ego can travel far and wide and be conscious of many things beyond the scope and ability of your brain. Okay, let's review the definition of conscience. Conscience is a sense of obligation to one's own best interest to be good and to do right to others and to uplift one's own character. Conscience reminds one to be honest, upright, just, and virtuous. Conscience is that quality of mind that helps one hold for a lifetime to whatever different moral rules are inculcated by the various societies into which one incarnates. But as the ego learns higher principles, these tend to impose themselves during each succeeding incarnation, and by overriding a society's lesser moral code during a given lifetime, this helps the advanced ego to grow into a better person and thus contribute to the uplift of his society. All right. Yes, go ahead.
I think you're saying that if I feel like I want to find a more advanced or more suitable philosophy, that this is a function of my conscience. In other words, my church ruled out the possibility of there being anything like a brotherhood, and yet my reading The Ultimate Frontier left me with a set of ideas that really appealed to me and motivated me. Would this be a result of my conscience?
Conscience at the egoic level could be responsible for a nagging urge to better yourself and the institutions around you, even if, as yet, you don't know how to accomplish it. The appeal of The Ultimate Frontier is probably an intellectual one, and may have shown you a practical avenue to fulfill your egoic ideals.
Does conscience have anything to do with feelings of guilt?
Yes, it does have something to do with guilt, but let's sort them out a little better. Guilt is a conditioned reflex of the brain, and as such stands below the egoic level of conscience. Conscience is more rational and deals with conscious choices of moral considerations. When you violate your own standards, you feel cheapened and weak or foolish, and these feelings are very much like guilty feelings.
I believe you said that once an ego learns higher principles, that those principles tend to override any lesser moral codes which may be accepted by a society during his subsequent incarnations. Now, does this mean that the good I learn in this lifetime will somehow determine my views and attitudes in later lifetimes?
Yes. And any high principles that you have attained will subliminally exert themselves even in childhood. Unfortunately, the constant pressures of your environment can cause you to abandon your ideals if your society or peers convince you to adopt a lesser view of a perverted way. In some instances, one seeking for integrity in later life can cause one's ideals to re-emerge and manifest actively.
Can an ego, through really negative attitudes, eventually come to lose his conscience?
Conscience is a quality of the power of mind, and therefore it cannot be lost. What is important to us in any given lifetime is how that ability of mind is either cultivated or debilitated by the mores of the times into which one incarnates, or by one's associates in life. Character, integrity, and a sense of justice all seem to be enhanced by conscience, and therefore it is a valuable tool in the uplift of one's ego. To allow that tool to be dulled is indeed detrimental to you. Very good. Next is a definition of creativeness. Creativeness includes the imaginative abilities of visualization, original inventiveness, and the recombination of knowns into unique ideas. Creativeness is the quality of mind which describes the egoic power to order and manipulate etheric substance into patterns by thought alone. Thereby an ego can bring into real existence those things he desires via an act of will out of personal inspiration. The quality of creativeness causes the akashic record to be impressed by one's every thought. The act of mental precipitation is a function of creativeness. Does anyone have a question on this one?
If a person paints pictures that are unique and innovative, or if he composes new melodies and fresh orchestrations, we say he is creative. Would this be the same as the quality of mind called creativeness?
Yes. Inventiveness uses the mind power of creativeness, while the brain operates on a level of developing the skills to manipulate the media in which it is expressed.
It sounds to me like most of our mind power is related to creativeness. Do you agree with that?
Now that I think about it, I agree with that. Actually, all the qualities of mind are inseparably bound to one another. God didn't create 10 qualities of mind and link them together to form the phenomenon of mental power. An ego couldn't somehow lose one of these qualities. Nevertheless, certain activities and contemplations are linked to the development of the respective qualities, and so an ego may exhibit some aspects stronger than others during his growth. Mind simply is mind, but in order for us to better analyze what its powers are, we have assigned definitions to its major aspects as it exists at the egoic level.
Is sexual energy in any way related to egoic creativeness?
Yes, but this is manifested at the level of the physical body. Creativeness at its source at the egoic level does not need your functioning through a physical vehicle. Sexual energy needed for procreation and intellectual creativity are the two principal ways that the creative, regenerative energy of the body reveals itself. The aspiration to build and to reproduce spring from egoic creativeness. Looks like we're ready to go on to the next definition. This one is intuition. Intuition falls into two categories. The first covers the receiving of information by thought transference, which includes telepathic communication. This is exhibited as the sixth sense when the ego is incarnate. Therefore, extrasensory perception comes under this quality of mind. The second category includes the ability to combine facts instantly into a correct conclusion without consciously using rational reasoning processes. Intuition allows ready insight into people and situations, and it is often manifested as immediate cognition or apprehension of a matter previously unknown and unconsidered. I intuit there will be questions on this characteristic. Yes?
Is there such a thing as brain intuition?
That's deviating a little from my emphasis on egoic mind, but it may serve to clarify some distinctions between mind and brain. There are situations where animals obviously are sensitive to impending earthquakes, floods, and severe weather changes, so that they can prepare to protect themselves and their young. Animals cannot know these things. They respond to incoming data in instinctive, pre-programmed ways due to genetically transmitted brain synapses, but they do this without having consciousness or awareness. Even human beings respond unconsciously to subliminal input without associating cause and effect at a rational conscious level. Automatic brain functions can associate long-forgotten observations into warning signs when something vaguely similar confronts you. You might intuit that someone is nearby when the only subconscious clue you have is the radiation of his body heat. A hunch is frequently a brain assessment of varied clues that are processed in the non-rational right hemisphere of the brain, which can come up with the correct answer without going through a conscious step-by-step reasoning sequence. Women seem to be especially good at this. A mother can read her infant's moods and needs uncannily via unconscious interpretation of subtle muscular and facial signals. All the foregoing I would call brain intuition.
Are we always receiving thoughts from others? If so, is that something you want to cultivate or suppress?
We are all continuously immersed in a flood of thoughts from other egos, high and low, but we have to be attuned to those persons before we are likely to be receptive to their thoughts. When an idea or concept enters through your conscious awareness, there is no way of knowing its source until you have achieved initiation, and even then some thoughts carry no signature by which to identify the sender. A thought could originate in your own brain, or your egoic mind, or you could be reading the Akashic record, or you may have tuned in on another mind thinking of the same things you were contemplating, or someone could be beaming thoughts specifically towards you. Regardless of their source, all thoughts are perceived the same way in your conscious awareness. The Brotherhood strongly discourage one's attempts to seek telepathic reception from unseen, unknown sources. To develop oneself as a sensitive who reads the mental and spiritual influences available for divinations is like committing slow suicide. Indeed, you must be careful to never dwell upon a thought which offends you or seems perverse and negative, for that will give it power in your life and be accepted as an influence on your philosophy of life.
If you feel you're absolutely correct about something, should you stick to your guns even though the people around you seem to insist that you're being vague and unable to support your beliefs logically?
I suppose the answer to that question is bound to be intuitive. Do you see my point? Fine. Let's proceed to the definition for reason. Reason applies to thinking power and the ability to consciously weigh facts, information, and principles in order to arrive at defendable conclusions via logical inference and deduction. Reason is a process by which one gains knowledge, determines cause and effect, derives mathematical precision, and gains command of the tools of language symbols upon which effective mind-to-mind communications depend. Intellectual activity and comprehension depends upon the power of reason. All soul growth involves a process of conscious reasoning and awareness, regardless of the source of information received through the other qualities of mind. The gaining of knowledge is a conscious, rational decision of what to store in the egoic memory. I see a hand already. Yes?
What do you mean when you say that gaining knowledge is a conscious decision of what to store in the egoic memory? You mean I have a choice?
Definitely. Who else would have the power to add knowledge to your memory? Since your egoic memory is a net result of your decisions and observations, then that memory is the essence of all you have learned. Much information may come your way, but you will retain and further act upon that data which you have successfully tested and decided is valid. The rejected information is simply discarded before you decide to memorize what is valid and worth keeping for future use.
Does the understanding of karma come under this quality of mind?
I would think so. The laws of karma don't seem to be learned by intuition, but rather by logical reasoning. Cause and effect, clearly apprehended, seems to be the way to understand the process of karma.
In your definition, you speak of mind-to-mind communication. In the past, I've heard you refer to mind-to-greater-mind communication. What does that mean?
Merely that we can egoically communicate with higher teachers telepathically as we advance spiritually.
Would the individual who typifies the Apollonian personality have reason as his dominant quality of mind?
Not necessarily. Apollonian thinking is a culturally induced preference for rational thinking over emotional or intuitive thinking. The parts of his mind that have been most developed over his past incarnations might not come to the forefront in his incarnation into Apollonian and patriarchal cultures. Since there are no more questions, let's proceed to the last of the 10 qualities of mind, emotion. There are 5 cardinal emotions with which an ego is endowed as part of his basic mind. These are the feelings of awe, joy, grief, fear, and anger, each of which can be expressed in widely varying intensities. All other emotions are modifications and combinations of these 5 brought about by societal conditioning during incarnations. The advanced ego has enhanced his expression of awe and joy and has eliminated further experience of grief, fear, and anger. Emotions are the source of humane sensibility, out of which arise compassion, empathy, and sentiment on the egoic level. Love is not an emotion, but a power emanating from the mind of God. Love is felt, however, through the emotional quality of mind. Questions?
Can a discarnate ego be neurotic or insane or the equivalent of that?
Neurosis has to do with fixations within the storage mechanisms and memory associations of the brain, and would thus have no counterpart in egoic mind. But if we use a classic definition of insanity as making inappropriate responses to the situations and realities of one's existence, then I believe you could call a black mentalist insane, even though he operates beyond the limitations of a brain. A person who becomes insane because of brain damage or possession by another entity usually has an egoic mind which is still normal, but unable to function through his ineffective brain. The sheer hatred and the evil view of the universe held by a black mentalist prevents him from viewing reality as it really is. Therefore, he responds to it in self-defeating ways.
Do angels and archangels ever feel anger? I'm thinking of the time Christ threw the money changers out of the temple.
I doubt that Christ was actually angry. I tremble to think what an archangel could do were he to become uncontrollably angry. Christ, as an archangel, has the personal ability to dissolve this planet mentally. I believe he demonstrated what looked like anger at the temple situation, since the problem with the money changers justifiably called for righteous indignation, but he is surely beyond the fear or helplessness that normally gives rise to anger.
You said love is not an emotion, but rather a power from God's mind. Would you explain this further?
Love is the great constructive power which streams forth from God to fill every corner of the universe. When a person has sufficient self-esteem to love himself, then this universal power can flow through him and be directed by him. But a person cannot generate love. He can only feel the effects of it operating through him.
Could you offer an explanation of what each of the 5 cardinal emotions involve and give some definitions of them?
Sure. Let's start with awe, which is an awareness of the vastness, complexity, and perfection of God's creation. Awe is reverent wonder tinged with fear, inspired by the unknown dimensions and nature of the sublime. Joy is the other positive cardinal emotion, and the essential condition for attaining it is that the person striving toward a goal reaches it. The intensity of the joy depends upon the degree of tension which had built up in the person over the course of pursuing the goal, the importance of the goal, the difficulty of the pursuit, and the suddenness of its achievement. At the higher egoic levels, joy manifests in one's sense of personal completeness, his connectedness to the echelons of refined egos in the universe, his perceptions of the beauties of the creation, and a sustained exuberance in his furtherance of the great plan. Grief is caused by the loss of something sought or valued. The intensity depends upon the value, and there are all shades ranging from mere disappointment to a profound bereavement of long duration with unbearable tension. Fear has as its essential condition the perception of a dangerous object or situation which threatens one. A key seems to be the lack of the capacity of the person to cope with the threat. A person tends to respond to changes in his life with anxiety and apprehension until experience allows him to become habituated to the new situation. Anger stems from blocking one's goal attainment, especially where there is a persistent frustration of attainment with the accumulation of tension. Exasperation gives way to anger if the frustration is prolonged, eventually reaching rage or fury. If the person sees his own shortcomings as a frustrating agent, he develops a self-destructive hostility, and if he sees an obstacle or a fear-engendering person thwarting him, he can develop hatred toward that agent and even be compelled to aggressively destroy the obstacle or person.
What are some of the other emotions besides the cardinal emotions?
To qualify as an emotion, a mental state has to cause stirred-up physical feelings and tensions, and all of the following emotions can either excite you to action or depress you to withdrawal. They are guilt, shame, remorse, pride, misery, loneliness, wonder, hate, pity, revulsion, horror, delight, self-consciousness, jealousy, and envy.
You've said that the emotional state of an ego shows in his astral aura. Do the qualities of mind once developed show up in one's aura?
For all practical purposes, no. To sum up, then, the 10 qualities of your mind are intended to be fully developed. And this process spans thousands of incarnations and progressions of the life waves until you have arrived at celestial perfection. Your egoic mind seeks to know and remember, to strive, to be aware of itself and other minds. It is creative, seeks to do what is correct, communicates and receives thoughts from other minds. It can decide and plan and experience emotions. Your mind is a seed of God which, when cultivated and nourished, can grow to eventual reunion with the Creator. Your mind has unlimited potentials, and you can realize them, as have those persons who have already qualified for initiation in the Brotherhoods. Do you have any other general questions on the topic of mind?
I notice in trying to change things within myself that what I'm painfully dissatisfied with are my personality and the way I deal with others. Do archangels have distinct personalities, or do egos that high operate at optimum in everything and have just one right way to do things, a way to say things, a way to communicate so that personality is no longer a distinction between them?
What you are pointing out is that personality is a collection of techniques you have evolved to get along as smoothly as possible in life. But the kind of personality that you develop is modified by the culture you are in, what kind of ambitions you have been imbued with by people in your family, the kinds of things that you strive for, and the kinds of things that you have to go through to achieve those goals. However, character is what you really are. Your basic astral aura reveals what your actual mind evolution is, and that's character. Personality is something that you can very readily, and it differs from lifetime to lifetime. Character, on the other hand, has been built up through thousands of incarnations and is the real you.
Would you say that very developed egos who have almost white auras would be very similar in character?
Yes, we become more unified as we all approach balance from our various unique experiences. Dichotomies like Apollonian and Dionysian, masculine and feminine, conservative and liberal, all move to a centered universality.
Would this have something to do with the meaning of the concept that when we get to be that high, we are basically all one?
You've got it. I was having a discussion recently on this question, whether personality is mostly determined by the kind of body you have incarnated into. Some people are highly energetic and some have a lethargic body chemistry. Some people are muscular and some are slight of build. Much of this seems to depend on something that is inherent in the physical vehicle itself, genetic factors that are inherent in that body. That must have an influence on your personality. If as an adult you are a man 5 foot 1 inch tall, then you are definitely not going to be throwing your weight around like the big guys. So you find a different way to deal with people. Your size obviously is going to modify your personality, but it has nothing to do with the egoic character that you have evolved over eons.
Are there different types of memory or categories within memory?
There are radically different kinds of brain memory. Things that you have to remember only from 1 minute to the next use an entirely different system of cognition than the kind of things where you study and tie it all together with many cross anchors. You can dredge up the latter information for years to come. When a person takes a driving trip around the country, he can manage to get back home again. This is a special memory. Finding a place you haven't been for maybe 20 years and be able to retrace your steps is a very unique ability of memory.
Do you know of any system for developing memory? There are a lot of things that I would have liked to remember that are just beyond recall.
Well, all of the systems that I have ever run into all come down to just paying attention, tying in what you are learning to something you already know. If you don't have such anchors, you won't have retrieval pathways to recall whatever it is. When you misplace things, it is usually because you were thinking of something else when you were setting it down. That is just inattentiveness. I believe we have run out of time for further discussion. I'd like to thank you.
You have been listening to The 10 Qualities of Mind, part of a series of discussions with Richard Kinninger entitled On Becoming an Initiate.